Hello and welcome to the Roll and Reflect podcast, the podcast where we bring you insights from behind the tabletop and beyond the box. I'm one of your hosts, Devin. Today's special guest is the brains behind a small tabletop company with a focus on highly interactive games of deep strategy, world immersion, and player psychology. Welcome to the show, Juli B of Distant Rabbit Games.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Julie, it's awesome. I've been wanting to talk to you a little bit about marketing and self-publishing and all sorts of stuff like this for a while. And finally, I can get you on. So this is really exciting to me.
Yeah, this is my favorite thing to talk about.
Well, that is good because we have a lot to talk about. But before we do, we have a special reflection question from our friend Kevin Levy. And he would love for you to answer that question in the comments below. So Kevin, take it away, my friend.
Damn it all. Oh, sorry. Are we still rolling? I'll make sure to be very careful next time. Anyway, your reflection question for this episode is, have you ever had a board game completely change your opinion about a certain genre or style of game? If so, what was it and why? Tell us in a comment. It only takes a sharp second. Now, let's continue with the show.
Okay, so this question is very interesting, and I know there's going to be a wide array of answers for this, but have you had a board game completely change your opinion on a certain game or style?
Gosh, I would say for me, when this was still pretty new into my board gaming journey, but the first co-op game that I ever played was Pandemic.
Okay.
And that one was great. And I mean, certainly, I'd never played a co-op game before, but it was really Hanabi when I got to it. When I first gotten into co-op games, I thought, okay, so this is a sort of thing where one person can sit back, another person can kind of take over and manage it and say, hey, I think it's best if you do this. I've played this game a ton before. And even in a well-meaning way, just sort of like you're on a team, you're cooperating and one person kind of takes charge. Hanabi was the first one for me where there was no possibility of doing that.
It
was
alpha
just
gamer.
A total, no quarterbacking, no alpha gamer. And that was a whole different experience. That limited communication, hidden information really kind of struck me. It made me want to make games like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's funny you say that about cooperatives because I am really trying to find cooperative games that don't have that problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so easy for someone to just jump on and be like, nope, do this, do this, do this. And at that point, they're playing your game and it's not as fun, right? So Hanabi is one I haven't played. It seems like I would like to try it now after knowing that.
Yeah, well, after Sky Team got the Spiel des Jahres, I got to try that. I requested it for my birthday.
Yes.
Thankfully got a copy.
So good.
Yeah, it really is. And it has the same dynamic. And we do a lot of 2-player games. Mm-hmm. So both Hanabi and Sky Team sort of work for that, the 2-player co-op.
Yeah, we actually, right after it got announced, we decided, okay, I'm going to learn Sky Team now because we had it on our shelf. But I'm like, now I really need to learn it and just buckle down. Yep. We played it one night and we were just blown away. We're like, okay, tomorrow, can we play it again? So it makes sense why that game won the spiel. For me, though, I am not first off, I'm not a Euro gamer. I don't really play a lot of Euro games. I'm not a heavier gamer usually. I also don't like economics and games especially. But when I played Wingspan and Honeybuzz, they kind of changed my opinions on what you think about Euro games. A lot of people will be like, oh, Wingspan, it's not a Euro. Well, it's not necessarily, but it also is an engine building resource management style thing. So you would consider that a Euro. It turns out the theming really resonates with me. And so playing those games, that's kind of like the high end of my game collection. Like those are heavy to me compared to what I normally play. So it kind of had me hooked. It's not really like I'm not going to go out and seek Brass Birmingham or something like that. That's still not for me, but I really enjoyed both my experience with that. And it kind of opened up my eyes to seeing what a Euro game could look like, especially with that kind of theme. So what are your thoughts on those two games and Euro games?
I haven't played Honeybuzz, but I liked Wingspan. I would say, I wouldn't classify myself as a Euro gamer either, but I got into Terraforming Mars years and years and years ago. And it's become sort of one of the default sort of, everybody's got those things that they like do, you do Wordle or you do, like something on your phone. It became one of those where it's like, oh, I'll just play the computer real quick at Terraforming Mars. Like, it's,
the upkeeps with the computer is much better.
I feel like even the hard computer is a little easy to beat on Terraforming Mars once you get used to the game. But just one of those things that that became sort of like the epitome of Euros. And I think I only played Wingspan maybe twice. I have it on my shelf back here, and we just never got back around to it.
Yeah.
I liked it well enough. But it sort of felt like, well, I have it.
Right.
But I'm like you, unless the theme really takes me, adore space. I love all space travel. So unless the theme really takes me, it's not going to be something I'm probably going to come back to too much.
Got it. Well, for those who have listened to this podcast before, know how much I love space. I don't actually. I really don't like space. That's like the one theme that throws me off, which is always weird because in person, I'm fascinated by everything space. Like I love the real world of space, but then I try to play a game and it just doesn't sit right for me. I don't know why, but it just doesn't
I like
work.
the logistics of space. I like how would we get to Mars?
Oh, okay.
How would we, actually create a society that could make space travel a priority over other things? That would be great.
Some great games. What do you guys think in the comments? I'd love to hear that, and we will answer anything you say. But let's give the people a little bit of introduction about who you are and what your company, Distant Rabbit Games, is all about.
Sure. So I am one of the owners. My husband and I own the company together. And Distant Rabbit Games is just the two of us. It's our tiny publishing house. It's primarily been, we've talked to other people about publishing their titles and stuff, but it's primarily been projects that are sort of our passion projects. The two of us, I illustrate, and Adrian, my husband, designs, and we play test everything together, and then split all the responsibilities of the business. So I do basically all of the small business running, logistics, all the finances, all of the freight, the manufacturing, all of that is my territory, going to conventions, customer relations, working with distributors, consolidators, retailers, all of that kind of stuff. Adrian does a lot more of the, he does graphic design for our website. He handles a lot of the advertising and handles the game design. And so between that split, it works pretty well actually for the two of us. We just happen to both really like the things that we do within our game company, but it means that I'm doing a lot of the small business running, which I just sort of fell into, but it turns out it kind of suits me. As much as I don't like a Euro game in most situations, for some reason, an economic Euro game that affects your life.
Yeah, it's a little different.
It's a whole different deal. Yeah. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, that's like the true definition of what an indie publisher is exactly kind of what you were talking about. And that leads me into my first question. So like, in your opinion, what would a definition of indie publisher be? Because we hear this a lot. Oh, you're an indie publisher, but what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, no, I know it's not an easy question. I would say I've seen people try to define it. When you go out for I don't know, I can't remember where I saw it. It was like an award or something like that, or a mentorship program or something that was only for indies. And I think the way that they defined it was 4 or fewer full-time employees.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing with board gaming is that even if we were bigger, like I don't know if Stonemaier has 4 full-time employees. Like they're huge, but so much of what we do is with consulting or with partners. Like we don't manufacture ourselves. We pay a manufacturer. We don't freight ourselves. We pay a freighter. So it would be really easy to get away with 4 or fewer full-time employees for a very long time and still be at a pretty sizable scale because you're, paying larger partners and things like that. I would say we definitely would qualify as far as, all board game companies are paying a manufacturer, paying for freight and that kind of stuff. So as far as small game companies, we're definitely on that scale, not being multinational. But I would say for me, I guess, this might be getting into a bit of the nuance of how publishing works, but when you're trying to get into a board game store, let's say you wanted to, get into your friendly local game store, you have to go through distribution. And if you have only a few titles, distributors won't touch you. They won't look at you. They'll never work directly with you.
Too small for them.
Yeah, too small time. You'll give them their stuff and they'll immediately say, nope, go to talk to somebody else. And the somebody else that you're going to talk to is consolidator. And so that would be like if you were an indie band, and there was some record that was sort of like helping get all of the indie bands out there, because you're not going to get picked up by like Empire
like
Records,
a promoter
like that,
almost.
Right? Yeah. And so exactly, if you need a consolidator, I would say maybe that's a good basis. I mean, I think Stonemaier still uses a consolidator. They might be direct with folks now at this stage, but they're kind of, I would say, maybe getting to the borderline. Only got a few titles, they're no Renegade. I think that might be my definition.
That is really interesting you mentioned Stonemaier, because yeah, you're right. Stonemaier is very much on the cuff of like, are they indie? Because it seems like they make $1 billion a year or something with their games.
Yep.
Yet there's only like a team of 4 or 3 people.
Yeah.
So it's like that's where the definition gets really tough. And I know the Dice Tower, I think, is the award that they talk about the indie publishers, like 4 or less, or smaller campaigns. If they ran like 1 or 2 campaigns, considered indie. But yeah, I think that's a good definition. For me, I kind of fall into that same way of like 4 or less people, but also X amount of campaigns. Because I consider indie more, inexperienced is a bad word, but it's like when you only run a few campaigns, you're still considered indie, in my opinion. Like, because you're still getting used to everything. Now, if you've ran 15 to 30 different campaigns, are you indie at that point? You kind of understand the crowdfunding life and stuff like that. But that's kind of like where I lean towards it.
Yeah.
I am definitely indie myself. I probably will be
we're
for a
both
while.
Pretty thoroughly indie.
Yeah. So this is why I wanted to discuss this today, because we're going to talk about running a small publishing company and just from the beginning. So can you talk about a little bit how Distant Rabbit started and why you wanted to get into this in the first place?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we did not intend to get into this in the first place. This was all by giant accident. So my husband and I got together about 9 years ago, and we were really into games. We loved playing a lot of 2-player games. There weren't a ton for us to choose from, but one of the things that we had always really loved when we were in grad school was playing social deduction and hidden traitor games. There were certain things that always kind of drove the both of us crazy. We didn't love the whole like witch hunt dynamic aspect of it. Like some of those party games can be really fun, but they can also have some frustration factors to them. But Adrian and I both really loved that you have to play the players, sort of poker style. Like you're not, it's not just a math game. It's
like politicking a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
It's going to be different based on who you're playing with. And so at some point he had he had finished grad school. He was in his first year as a professor, and he was going crazy with work. And whenever he has those moments, he just gets these big sparks of inspiration and artistic outpouring. So he just didn't sleep for 3 straight days, and he called me up and said he had this idea for a game, and we'd never made board games before. We didn't know anybody really in the board game world. We just played the 2 of us most of the time. And he was like, it's about the mob, and there's going to be these stoplights, and there's going to be anyway. And I was like, boy, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. He hadn't slept in 3 days. I thought he'd gone crazy. And so he made a prototype for it, and I played it. I was like, this is the best game I've ever played. This is awesome. It was hand building, high strategy game for 2 players that was all about betrayal. And there's just there was nothing for 2 players. It didn't exist. It was sort of like, well, if I'm not the betrayer, then you are, and now we're just in a competitive game. We didn't know at the time that there was nothing for 2 players out there. We just played this ourselves, and we didn't even know that how you would get a game made. We had thought maybe we would send out letters to game companies. We found out years later that actually his grandfather made board games. We never knew this about him.
Wow.
But his grandfather made board games and sent tons of letters out to people, and just had rejection slip after rejection slip. And it was just pretty wild to go back through all of that and see sort of what our lives could have been.
Like letters to like Hasbro, Milton Bradley.
Yeah, companies like that. I mean, I think it was, gosh, I don't know if he ever got to Hasbro, but yeah, he had probably 10, 12 rejection letters of all different games that he'd made. He was in board game design groups, and which is crazy for, this was
like a full turn.
I know. And none of us had any idea. It's a very parallel life, but we didn't know you could make games like yourself. We didn't know that you could publish them yourself. And so we made it for ourselves. We found companies that would print cards, like a prototype version, but didn't really think that this was going towards anything. And then we just played it ourselves for years. It was almost sad for me when we actually did find out that you can do Kickstarter, because it had been this game that now like defined my relationship with my husband. We started playing like less than a year into our relationship. And then by the time we'd been together for like 5 or 6 years, this was one of the main things that we did that was like just the 2 of us. And then all of a sudden it was getting shared with the world. It was almost a little bit of sadness.
Moment, but sadness, yeah.
But yeah, we've found some local publishers who had actually done the Kickstarter path before in a local game group, and when we lived in Athens, Georgia, they're game designers, and kind of went through all the information with them, how you get things made, and then got into some broader online groups and started doing some heavy research. And then, it was just, we figured, if we were going to keep it, I was doing all the illustrations, and he did all the game design. And if we wanted to keep it exactly the way that we'd always played it, that was our best chance with self-publishing. Thought we were going to lose a lot of creative control if we went any other direction. So that's how we got here. And it's been great. We've sold 52,000 copies.
Wow.
Which is,
congratulations. That's a big deal. That's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's been really unexpectedly amazing.
And I know it's funny you say the 2-player thing, because it's really changed with the times. Because I remember like 5 years ago was kind of when I jumped into the industry basically head first. And then there was like no 2-player games. And I am very good at designing 2-player games because that's all I have as well. I don't have friends that play.
And you've got a baby at home too.
And I've got a baby now. Yeah.
What choice do you have but 2-player games?
Exactly. So I just dove in. I was like, okay, let's design 2-player. But then all the publishers I was pitching to at the time were like, 2-player games will not sell. 2-player games will not sell. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. That is
demonstrably false.
And now it's 2025, and 2-player games are the hit sales. I'm like, I knew I was right at some point. I noticed in the Distant Rabbit, it said something about player psychology, designing with player psychology in mind. Can you discuss this further? I'm really curious about how that changes your game design choices.
So that kind of gets to the same thing that I was talking about with the social deduction games, and one of the things that we liked about them. And I mean, similar to Hanabi too, also, it's what we really wanted when you play some games. You could, imagine a game where you could program a computer to play with you. Like a lot of the Euros, you could program a computer, if you were good enough at it, to, whatever random draw you got to make the best strategic decision. But in a game like Hanabi, you can't. You're playing with the other player. You're trying to determine how they're going to interpret cues from you. And with Mantis Falls, for us, it was the same way. When I play with my husband, we get in sort of this pattern of what is considered suspicious behavior and what is not. We've played, thousands of times together. And we have a standalone sequel that's coming out. We've been playtesting every single night. We kind of get in this rhythm of, this is acceptable. And, I'm going to hurt you, but I have to. And you're like, yeah, I get it. This is some amount of suspicious, and I'm filing that away. If I play that with a different player, depending on the type of person, let's say they're nervous they're going to lose and they're going to feel embarrassed if I turn out to be an assassin and turn out to be a bad guy and turn on them, they might try and kill me right there. They might see me do that thing that my husband would consider absolutely fine. And this player, because they're a lot more suspicious or paranoid or worried about losing, I have to play very differently with them. And so I can't program a computer to do that. It's all about my relationship or my knowledge of the person that's sitting across from me, and us communicating with each other. And that's, I think, the factor that makes it a human only game, like the Turing test or something. Like you can't fake knowing somebody like that.
When I like how that's how you can get that immersion factor into your games specifically, like in your words and stuff. So that's really cool. Can you give us a brief explanation of Mantis Falls? I know we mentioned that a couple of times, but tell the people what that is all about.
So Mantis Falls is our first game. We're working on our second one right now. So Mantis Falls is a 2 to 3 player game of betrayal. We call it sometimes cooperative game. So if you and I were playing together, Devin, then it would be potentially we are both witnesses to something we shouldn't have seen in a mob ruled town in the 19th. And we've got to escape this town with our information and our lives. We are strangers to each other. We're hoping that we're both on the same team. And if we are, then we only win if we both make it to the end together and alive. So you've got to save my life. I've got to save yours. We're going to have all kinds of obstacles and enemies and things that are going to drive suspicion and distrust between us. And we've got to be able to get through all of that and still trust each other in order to defeat these things. So let's say I'm a witness. I have a 50-50 chance that you're a witness with me. If, on the other hand, you're an assassin, then my task is to kill you before you kill me. And your task is to kill me before I kill you. So either, depending on the division of roles, your objective is different. Either you're trying to escape town together and save each other's lives, or you're trying to kill
Murder
each other. And you don't know which of those two games you're playing.
Wow.
And so that creates you're now hand building, guarding against both scenarios. If you're a witness, you would now have to split your hand to be self-protective and also be protective of the other player. Because if they die, you could lose, if you're actually both witnesses.
That sounds really fascinating.
It's real fun. Yeah. So it definitely has a lot of real life implications. And I can tell you, I've talked to many married couples who have said they can't play this together. It's too much for them.
Backstab.
Yeah. I had a friend a long time ago. I didn't know this at the time, and it made me sad, but he and his wife were one of the first people that I had playing it. And he was the assassin. He was lying to her and betraying her. And I was kind of like giving them tips as they go along, private information to help them play. And then when he pulled the trigger and actually started betraying her, it was like an hour and a half into the game, and they'd been, cooperating all of this time. And then he was like cackling with laughter about how, pulled the wool over her eyes. And she got so upset. She started like panicking and
oh my God,
and yelling at him. And it turned out a couple months later that he'd been cheating on her the whole time.
Oh
I was
no!
Like, oof! Did I just I feel like I poked the bear.
You sparked something there.
I know. Like whatever distrust was already there, I'm really like keying into. And so sometimes people will look at this and my husband and I and be like, really? You want to just betray each other all the time over and over?
Mm-hmm.
But for us, as much as it's a game of betrayal, the coolest part, the thing that I absolutely love, is that in order to actually make it out and have the successful co-op victory, sort of like I was talking about with Hanabi, it's not just that you and I would have to cooperate with each other and have good strategy. It'd be that we'd have to get over our distrust. Like I might be paranoid and think you're an assassin and kill you, and you're actually just a witness, and I spoiled the game for both of us and caused us both to lose. And so by the time you get to the end, if you're actually witnesses and you actually had a victory, there's this like, wow, not only did we won the game and that's fun, but like there was a real level of distrust that we both had to get over. And there's this like very positive, cathartic victory that's only really possible if you feel it's possible that they might betray you instead. And so that's the like big positive side. Everyone sees it as like a really negative, mean betrayal game. It's way more cathartic than that if you play it long enough.
Yeah, that's really intriguing. It's like the psychological side of marketing is one of my favorite things. And so I love that aspect of this game. Like not necessarily for the things like that could happen. Like in the real world, that's just kind of hopefully a one-off. It really tells you, it speaks about your game and like the ability to actually bring out some of that.
Yeah.
Like,
and
mentality.
I mean, yeah. And again, not in that situation was not ideal, but yeah, no, we wanted it to evoke real emotions, like when you're an assassin, you're going to betray somebody. My heart actually starts pounding harder than it was before, because I'm like, gosh, I was lying for an hour or an hour and a half. And now I'm about to reveal that. And that does say something in real life, that I'm good at lying, or that he couldn't tell he's going to be disappointed, and then he might actually in the real world think less of me or something. It's not going to happen, but it's hard to lie like that.
When you were designing this game and like getting this game to the publication, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you were launching it, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, for us, it was that we really didn't know what we didn't know. I mean, we first printed our game and we put it in a Zazzle commemorative wood keepsake box, because we didn't know that you could get, just regular board game boxes made out there. When we were going through this whole process, there were all kinds of things like we didn't understand how Kickstarter works. We didn't know that at that time, and even more true today, you need to do legwork ahead of your Kickstarter. You have to have a fan base built up. We were going to go to Kickstarter cold. Nobody knowing about our I know. Thank goodness somebody stopped. Yeah. My buddy Eugene, who's also a board game designer, was like, whoa, no, stop.
Yeah, don't launch yet.
Wait. Go online, talk to, I think at the time, right now it's like, I think Board Game Design Labs were kind of where most of the conversation around designing happens these days. But at the time it was like Kickstarter advice, tabletop Kickstarter advice was one of the big ones. Yeah. And so they're like, go on here and ask your question and say what you're about to do. and you'll see how people will react to the idea of going on cold. And so then we paused, and we spent probably about 6 months just learning everything that we could. I mean, 8 months really, learning everything that we could about promotion, about Facebook ads, about reviewers, all, like, everything that we could absorb. And that's the main thing, is that there is a lot of information out there. There are a lot of resources, and people are very willing to give you those resources. But you have to come in with not just an open mind to what the answers to your questions might be, but an open mind to the fact that you're not even asking the right questions, or you don't even know what the questions are. I mean, there are just so many details to this industry. And fortunately, there are people who will handhold you through it because they want to help. That's one of the beautiful things about the board game space, is that there's so many resources. But
everyone wants to help you.
They do. Like. They really, really do. But you do have to make sure to be involved in the community and ask. And I think that was one of the main things that we were able to do. And you've got to be willing also, it's tough, but to promote yourself. Some people are really good at that. Some people are too good at that, don't know when to stop. Most people that I've seen are not. And so you got to have a hype man. If you can't do it, your brother, your girlfriend, whoever it is could do it for you. Adrian designed our game, and I was the hype man. It was way easier for me to be the hype man because it wasn't my design. I could freely tell everybody that it's an incredible game, and I wouldn't have to feel weird about it because it's how I felt. Adrian could think that himself, but all that self-doubt, and then also that weirdness that comes with self-promotion makes you feel uncomfortable. That'll get in your way. You got to have somebody who's able to do that for you.
Yeah, and that's something I had to learn the hard lessons from when I first started. Is I was on the end of promoting too much. I was, quote unquote, I guess, good at it, right? Like, I was always promoting, but it wasn't, like, originally it was my game, and I learned really fast at what not to do, learning about all that. But then I found this game called Megapulse, and one of my good friends now, he designed that game, and I absolutely loved it. And so I volunteered to basically help run his entire campaign, and was like, oh my gosh, I love this game. And so I was hyping it up like crazy. And everyone was like, dude, calm down. Like, why are you hyping this game up so much? You're just doing this to do this. And I'm like, no, I actually love this game. Like, I really want this game to go. So it took me a bit to get over that and realize how to self-promote and do it efficiently, because it has changed so vast where it started and where it is now. It's very hard to promote efficiently today, especially with Facebook's algorithm not liking half the things you're posting. So it's like, how do you get over that, as well as the community making it look like you're not a sales person basically
and
the
that's
whole
really,
time?
I mean, you and I are kind of on the same boat in that I think we're both very enthusiastic people.
Yeah.
and that can be taken, you can be totally genuine about that, but that can be taken by other people as
negative and
nothing but sales, nothing but trying to supersede other people with your own stuff. And that's that's the other end of it, is that you got to be able to, you got to give as much as you take. And so if you go into communities and say, here's this thing I want to tell you about, they're going to say, hey, why don't you sit down and listen for a bit?
Right. 80-20 rule is
Exactly.
the big thing, where you want to spend 80% of the time promoting other people or working with other people or helping provide value, and then 20% is promotion. That's kind of what the 80-20 rule is. Can you personally share some strategies you've found effective in building and maintaining your community around the game?
Yeah. So we certainly could do better about this. We've got Reddit, Discord, Facebook groups and all that kind of stuff. And so create spaces for people to talk. We've got it's private, but we've got up on Board Game Arena. It's in eternal alpha.
Eternal alpha.
Yeah.
I love that.
And so people can kind of tell each other about it and invite each other or ask us for invites or something. There are spaces for people to talk. We get people on Discord who come in and talk about the games that they've played, or coordinate playing together online. I think one of the things that we do best, and there's plenty of things that we could do better, we tend to focus a lot of our energy on designing new games and a little bit less on maintaining our current community, which is a shame. But one of the things that we do well is we're very, very responsive to people.
Yep.
Any customer that comes to us with an issue, like rules question, we respond immediately and directly to them. Somebody on BGA asks a rules question, we're usually the first response to that question. We have alerts for all of those things. People who email us directly get responses. People in our Discord who ask stuff, we jump in and comment right away. And so we feel very accessible to our customers and our players. And I think that does a couple of things. For one thing, demystifies some of the rule stuff. So you're not getting now incorrect answers from people.
Right.
Somebody asks a rule question and then they, then things get confused. The other big thing is that you want to feel accessible to people. You want people to feel like their playing experience matters. To the people who designed the game. And I mean, more than anything, we want to know about people's playing experiences because, first of all, it affects our design for future games, but that's the reason we published, as much as we like it being a business, and it's great that it is profitable and self-sustaining at this point. That's incredible for a first game.
Yeah.
The bigger thing was that we made this because we love it. I mean, we played it by ourselves for years. And so just the idea that other people are willing to take the time and enjoy it and then share their experiences with us is huge. And that's the main thing that we're getting out of publishing. And I think people appreciate that kind of experience. We're not just in it to like publish game after game where we want to have a relationship with it like it's art.
And I think one of the big things that you mentioned is kind of like the willingness to be fully like open with your community and stuff. You may not, like for you said you may not have been like the best at communicating like with your community and building the community. However, you want to show them that, we're not just a company.
Yeah.
Right? We are people behind this company. Like we are Distant Rabbit, but we will answer your questions. And that's my big thing with communities. You want people to feel heard. In real life, that's exactly what we should be doing as well. People want to feel heard. It translates just like the same way with game design. And so building a community is not necessarily doing all these 500,000 different things, but it's all about just knowing, hey, you have a question? Well, answering that question like you're doing is just the first step of building a good, strong community for super fans and super backers for your next campaign and stuff like that. So it builds on
they feel like
that.
They have a direct relationship with you, which they should.
Exactly.
I mean, it's an intimate thing to design something, to create art, and then have somebody actually absorb that art. And so it should feel like a real relationship. It is pretty direct in terms of one person creating something and somebody else actually seeing it for what it is. So
exactly. Yeah. And I know in the terms, of indie publishing and small publishing, there are some common misconceptions about what it is like to be an indie publisher. In your opinion, what are some common misconceptions about indie publishing that you wish more people would understand?
So I would say my top one is the finances of it. Well, occasionally this first came from our kids. Like this was the very first thing. When we had our Kickstarter, we got, I think it was like $187,000 for the Kickstarter, right? Which is like amazing. And so our kids were like, wow, $187 split 4 ways between the 4 of us. That's going to be a lot for each one. That's so precious. Like,
we're just rich now.
I know, right? And I was like, yeah, it is great. And it is, it does start a company, which is awesome. The amount of that goes to not only producing the games that we needed to produce, but then producing more games because we need to sell after that. All of the expenses of the last 5 years, getting written off all of our expenses in terms of producing this, going to conventions, all kinds of stuff. By the end, it's really not that much money left. Kickstarter is about as good as you do in terms of profit margin. But then, so we've sold, 52,000 games, right? And so then what people will do is say like, okay, you sold that many, multiply it by the MSRP, and that's how much money you've made. Also, no. That would be so nice.
Yeah, that would be really nice.
98% of the games that we sell, not for the MSRP. That's the big thing is small publishing. When you're selling large quantities of games, your money is going like one of two places. Either you're paying a consolidator or a distributor. And so, for example, our MSRP is $35. We get between $11 and $14 per sale. And that's not profit, that's revenue. So that then you've got to take out the cost of manufacturing the game, the cost of promoting the game, the cost of freighting the game over. And that gets to be, a few dollars per game. that you now
So
make.
like you make like $1.50.
Yeah, it's actually not that much money that you make in the long run per game. And that's 98% of if you're doing consolidation or distribution. If you're like selling, like most of our games that we sell through Barnes and Noble. The money that we make on Barnes and Noble sales are very, very low. Barnes and Noble makes their cut and our distributor or consolidator makes theirs. Or so we've got other friends who do the Amazon game really hard, right? They self-sell on Amazon. There are some serious costs that come with that. Not only just the cost of selling on Amazon, but if you are going to sell well on Amazon, you're paying a ton in ads. The cut that's actually your take home at the end of the day is very low. And so people look at that and think, oh yeah, that's great. I mean, we're fortunate that we are self-sustaining and we're profitable. But it's less profit than people would like to imagine at 50,000. And I think a lot of people who get into publishing, they're like, oh, if I could do this Kickstarter and I sold 5,000 games, here's how much money I would make. It's unfortunately a bleaker scenario than that. And I can tell you, having sold 50,000 in 3 years, the take home for me, as I am our sole like employee, the take home for me is not considered a great wage. It's not like as a salaried employee, it's pretty darn low. So, and then the rest goes to, we've got to pay taxes. We've got to do the reprints. So you got to, I mean, if you don't have money in the bank to reprint, those reprints are very, very costly, especially if you're doing thousands at a time. So yeah, that part is the
hard part.
People are eternally optimistic about that. That's board game industry is pretty low margins.
Speaking about like low margins and all this stuff, can you talk about a time when you had to pivot and adapt your plans? And then what have you learned from that experience?
We've had quite a few times when we've had to pivot. I would say when we were doing our Kickstarter, we got very weirdly lucky and unlucky all at the same time. So this whole 2-player craze thing, if I had to pinpoint when that started, I would say it was 2020 when everyone was stuck at home.
Yep.
Everyone was like, well, shoot, what do we do? And then,
it's just us two. What do we do now?
Yeah. What do you know? 2-player games were real popular. So we, in 2020, we're supposed to launch March 31st, was our initial launch date. And what do you know? That was like 2 weeks into the pandemic. That was before anybody was going to be getting refund checks. That was when like the rates were skyrocketing and people thought it was the end of the world. We were like, well, this is not the time to launch.
Right.
We were really lucky because Frosthaven ended up launching basically the same day that we were going to, and thank goodness we didn't try for that. So we delayed, and we ended up launching in June. That was at the time when people were starting to get real bored at home. Yeah. And then we were saying, hey, here's a 2-player social deduction hidden trader game. People really, really liked the idea of that. And so we got very, very lucky in that regard. But at the same time, we were launching a brand new board game company for the first time in the middle of a giant global shipping and freight catastrophe. Yeah. And so, imagine, all of the ways in which people have seen Kickstarter go wrong or crowdfunding go wrong, where somebody overpromises and underdelivers, burned, and then they become really suspicious of other Kickstarters in the future. And it's funny because it's actually a lot like our board game, the whole like game of trust thing. Yeah. It's a meta game for that. So they get suspicious that you're not actually going to do what you say you're going to do, that you're betraying them and all of that kind of stuff. And so we were a first time designer coming out and giving promises of what this timeline was going to look like in the middle of an unprecedented disaster. And then we missed those timelines. Yeah. Because of course we did, because our manufacturing company was shutting down with COVID.
Everyone was at home, closed
down. And then there was the canal shut down because of the big boat going through it. And I mean, there was like everything. And then the shipping industry had like 4 or 5 times the amount of volume that it's ever had. And so prices went skyrocketing. It was just everything all at once. And so we would message people saying, I'm sorry, we're not going to make this deadline that we had promised you guys. Yeah. And then immediately there would be people saying like, I see how it is, Right. And I was like, okay. So one of the ways that we had to pivot in that situation was put a little bit of skin in the game. And so we created, when we told people we weren't going to be able to deliver, and that delivery was completely outside of our hands, we created new content for them as fast as we possibly could. And so we had my husband had this idea of creating a strategy guide. It's like 36 page, like covers every single card, how you might use it as an assassin, how you might use it as a witness. And so he worked furiously over the course of a week to write every thought he'd ever had creating this game, and all the combos you could do with our cards. I worked on creating a comic that explains what's going on in the world of Mantis Falls. And then we came out with it around the same time that we were telling people we were going to be delayed. We said, yes, we're going to be delayed. We're going to give you this. We're going to print it and give it to you for free along with this, to apologize for the fact that there's this huge delay. And so that was expensive. We had to now print a whole new thing. It was time consuming. But it did prove to our backers that we weren't delaying and taking their money. We were delaying and putting up an enormous amount of effort to create added value out of that delay.
And that's that community we were talking about. Those things right there is exactly how you build your community out further. And I think that was a good choice to pivot, and a good way to do it too. Yeah, it did add some expense. If you were to do that again, would you do the same thing, or would you make it more of like a digital PDF or something?
I would absolutely do the same thing. I love that compendium. It is. I'm so glad. I'd never done comic illustration before. I'm so glad that I did that. It was super fun, and it actually kind of jump started a project that I'm working on now. A novel about the world of Mantis Falls. Cool. And so totally 100%. And having the compendium is awesome. It's been great to be able to throw that at people if they're brand new to the game and say, if you have a card and you don't know how to value it, you're looking at your hand and you're like, I don't know what to get rid of. You can just look in here and see our rating of the strength of that card. And that can be like an immediate guideline of how to work it.
When you approach the marketing for your games, how do you do that with the limited resources that you have compared to like larger publishers?
I would say, it's tough. I'm sure we're not doing it. There's just no way to do it as well as bigger companies can. You do have to be very smart about it. We can't afford to just throw money at attempts for things. And so, there's a lot of things where, you could advertise on Board Game Geek, for instance, and with banner ads and things like that. You have to look at those things all very, very thoughtfully before you're going to go into them. What's the ROI? What's the return on investment for that particular to your style of game? Board Game Geek has a really good return on investment, but specifically for war games and Euro games, less so for party games or thematic games. And so every single decision about where you're spending your money or where you're putting energy advertising, you have to be way more thoughtful. You can't just like throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Like, you can't be experimental like that. You've got to know. It's expensive
to do it that way.
Yeah. And that it's a great way to learn what works, but you can't really afford to do that if you're a tiny company. I would say anything that you can do to kind of test the waters, to understand more about what your audience wants or what they like, with things like Facebook, to do a lot of A/B testing, do small amounts of money and make sure your ads are really working. And I know big guys are doing that too, but it's more important for small guys because Facebook can just eat your money. It can just go and go.
And they will. They want to.
They do. Yeah. They don't care if you're getting a return on investment. Nope. I know they kind of do because they want your repeat business, but for the most part, they're going to just, as long as you run an ad, they're going to take the money for it. And so it's on you then to make sure that it's as efficient and successful an ad as you can make. And so I think a lot of doing your research into what avenues work. Even before going to like Gamma was a big gamble for us. That's an expensive trip. Gamma's was in Louisville this last year. That's the booth there, the flights out, hotel, all of that kind of stuff. For a small business, that amounts to probably several $1,000s of a gamble, not knowing if you're going to get more business from something like that. And so talking to other small publishers, how has this worked out for you? That's really key.
Let's just say I'm brand new and I want to start my own thing. I want to start an indie publishing company. 3 pieces of advice that you would give them. What would those 3 pieces be?
Make sure you know what you don't know. Be a part of the community. Be a really active part of the community, because people will tell you if you're doing something that's not right. People will be glad to give you their advice. I would say that is my rule number 1. You have to be a part of the community, because there is no chance that you know every aspect of this well enough to do it right the first time. We didn't, and we did tons of research and had mentors. You have to be a part of that if you're going to succeed on your first time out. The second thing is being really conservative. It's unfortunate, but the margins are tight enough that it's great to invest in yourself, and it's great to take a gamble. You've got to make those investments very wise ones. You can't go to every convention just with the hopes that it'll all pay off. You've got to be strategic about which ones you're going to. You've got to be thoughtful about which reviewers you're going to work with and have a budget, a very clear budget for how you're going to spend your money. I've seen people have to mortgage their homes.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah. And people be overly optimistic and lose a lot of money on that. And then the third thing is that everyone says this about small business. It's really true. And it's really true, especially in board games, because you're running what is basically an international business. Like, if you're going to run a Kickstarter, you're probably going to fulfill worldwide. For every small business owner you've ever known in your life, the chances that they're doing worldwide multi-tax zone VAT freight fulfillment as a tiny first-time business, very, very low. And the idea that they're also doing creative work, graphic design, illustration, board game design, like the amount of skills that you'll need to have, the amount of creative skills combined with financial skills, combined with advertising skills, you better be able to be ready to wear a lot of hats, learn things very, very quickly, or very thoroughly, and be open to learning new things, or be ready to hire a lot of people to do this for you. That's kind of the big one. Adrian and I probably have the equivalent of 8 part-time jobs each. I mean, even just doing the freight would be considered at some places. You being a freight manager would be its job.
Yeah, for sure.
And I do that in addition to like 7 other things. So
yeah, I totally understand that. I'm going through the same thing right now, and I'm one of those guys that's very comfortable with wearing several different hats. So, which is why I was like, a lot of people have been telling me, hey, self-published, because
it's a good fit for you. Totally,
it's like you're the kind of person that would do that.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right. It's 15 different hats, and you always have to be doing new things and learning and stuff like that. So it's very tough, but hopefully in the long run, it'll be worth it. That is going to conclude our main topic for today. If you want to run a small publishing company, or if you have any questions on that, feel free to comment below or just reach out to Julie or I, and then we would love to answer those questions. Those are great things, and those are stuff that we are passionate about. So please feel free to be comfortable enough to just ask, because that's the first thing. You just got to ask, and people will answer. Definitely out there. That is why I love the board game industry. Before we go, we have to talk about something called The Beyond. And that is something we do in every episode where we talk about something usually exciting outside of the board game industry. Julie, what do you got to talk about today in the Beyond segment?
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, not board games, but I do have to say, I moved to North Carolina recently, and I'm in a group called Game Designers North Carolina. And it's
a big group now.
It's a huge group. It's amazing. We've got chapters all over the state. And we have like we have a meetup every week here in
Jealous.
where I am around Chapel Hill. Yeah, it's pretty stellar. And I'd say one of the coolest things for me is that we have some really great designers, and I get to see people's stuff come out and be really successful, and I'd be like, oh, I play tested that when it was really new. Friend Mitch had Art Society, which has been up for a few awards. Mike and Grace had Smoke Owls, which just won an Origin Award. Like, it's just really cool
to see it from the ground up.
Yeah. And to also be able to get excited for friends of mine that I've gotten in the industry, where I'm like, hey, like, your first time publishing was a huge success. Your first time designing, you just got picked up. Like, that's super fun from the other side now. So
it really makes it rewarding, for sure.
It does. Yeah, it's also exciting because I don't get to play a lot of games after they're published, because we spend so much time playtesting our own.
Yep.
But in the process of playtesting other people's games, because we kind of trade off, now I get to play a lot of games before they're published. Yeah. And most of them do get published. It's awesome.
Which is really cool. And I wish we had something like that in my area. I'm really surprised we don't. And I tried starting something, but there's just not a lot of game designers in my area. So for my Beyond segment, I just recently found something called Mellow Dice. It's a website. And Roy Cannaday from the Dice Tower, I was watching a video and he mentioned this, and it's basically tabletop music for your game sessions. I know you can go into Spotify and type in like certain games, but this one will literally pull music for that game theme, because they take tags from YouTube and they kind of pair it up with the music. So my buddy and I just started Mice and Mystics, and I typed it in. I was like, Mice and Mystics, and then it came up with like 65 different songs that are all kind of in that world and theme, and red wall music and all this stuff. And I was like, this is pretty sweet. So I discovered that. So thanks, Roy, for showing us that. That was really cool discovery. and I've been
My
using it now.
husband wrote an album for our game, like a full-length album soundtrack, and we have like a recommended listening. We have Twin Peaks soundtrack and all that kind of stuff. But we didn't realize about Melodice until after we published the game. I thought it was such a cool idea. I really appreciate how much people get into the immersion aspect of playing.
That's a hot topic. Some people really don't like playing music in the background, but for me, I like playing music just without lyrics, because once you have lyrics in there, you get distracted and stuff like that. But awesome. Well, Julie, thank you so much. That was an amazing episode. I hope you guys learned something from this episode, and we'll have Julie on again probably in the future to talk about something else. If you liked what you heard, please feel free to subscribe and follow our show anywhere you find at Roll and Reflect and at Roll and Reflect Podcast. Hit that bell notification icon on YouTube so you can know when we release new episodes. Thank you to Kevin for our reflection question, Laura for the timestamps, and of course, thank you all high rollers out there for listening. We couldn't do this without you. And until next time, may your games be legendary and your rolls be epic. We'll talk to you later.